Did you have a good celebration celebrating America's 250th birthday yesterday? Yeah. I did. We let freedom ring throughout the hills of Ohio with some gunpowder and torches. It was kind of like a war zone. A little dangerous, but nobody got hurt, so it was a good celebration. If you could have seen what I saw, though, Billy was running along. We had lines of mortars lined up with the wicks coming out, tied in twos, and he's running with a torch, lighting these 12 rows, I think several rows of mortar shells, and they're starting to go off, and we were praying a bit for Billy's safety, but he did that all in the name of Happy Birthday America, I'm pretty sure. Nothing to do with boys and explosives, but tell you, the boy definitely comes out when you get around that stuff, but not in me, I'm just in him, of course. And in Jesse, I saw a little bit there too, but or maybe in me. Anyway, we had a good time celebrating 4th of July. I hope you did too. July 4th, 250 years ago, our nation came together as a nation, and John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, I'm sure you're aware of those two names. They were key figures in the formation of our nation, of our country. And they joined together on this quest of independence, and they were really good pals until the nation was born. And then they had differences on how they thought government should run, state-run government, federal government, and there was this opposition that drove them far apart. They actually moved far apart, and for years there's this great distance between them, and their friendship was damaged. Much later, though, in their life, there was a mutual friend named Benjamin Rush who encouraged both of them, said, you guys need to patch things up. You need to write a letter to one another at least and start communicating. And it was Adams was the first one to humble himself enough to write a letter, and he sent a letter to Jefferson. One of his letters, it said this: you and I ought not to die before we've explained ourselves to each other. And I hear that term, and I hear things, knowing their situation, I hear things like, before we die, we ought to explain ourselves to each other. Before this disagreement in between us becomes a total, absolute destruction, we ought to communicate some. And I'll put it like this: before assumptions write the final chapter, we ought to hear the whole story. They began to write back and forth. They patched things up. And it's interesting that they both loved America. They both were united in seeing America come to pass. And 50 years later, after they had patched things up, and on July 4th, in 1826, at the 50th anniversary of America, both of these two men passed away in an old age on the same day. So even America came together at America's birthday. They were united, and in their own deaths, they were able to patch things up and still united around the country. And I think it's interesting. But what's very real in our world, in our life, is that people who can stand united together can quickly become divided when suspicion and conflict and distance gets in the way. I've been preaching through Joshua, and last week I was at Joshua 22, and I stopped at verse 5, and really I had intended to preach what I was going to preach today then, but I stayed with verse 5, and I'm going to pick up in there. But what it is, we know that Joshua has led the Israelites across the Jordan and into the promised land, and they had battles to fight and saw God do crazy, awesome things. And they suffered some defeat, and they overcame that, and they fought and fought and fought, and one of the groups, or 2.5 tribes, came across the Jordan to fight with them, even though they already had their possession. But they went and fought until all of the rest of Israel were able to get their possession in the land. And so this whole group came, and they were united together. But then something happens. They win every battle. They defeat the giants, do all this stuff. And then Joshua is releasing this 2.5 tribes back to their land that they had. But in this time, there's one group of people who saw the other group, these 2.5 tribes that were going back. Those 2.5 tribes stopped, and they built this big altar that raised suspicion to the other part of the group. The other part of the group assumed the worst, and the other part of the group gathered for war. They were going to go to war against these people, their own people who built this altar. And the danger wasn't the altar that they saw being built. The danger was the story that assumption would go ahead and write in their minds before they ever had time to have a conversation with the people who were building the altar, their own people, the people whom they're supposed to love and be in unity with. Now we know John 15:12 says this, "This is my commandment, that you love one another even as I have loved you." That's to us, to one another. We are to love one another even as Jesus has loved us. We are to, does Jesus love all of humanity? Do you know the answer to that? You can answer that. He does, right? Jesus loves the world. For God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in Him shall not perish. The Lord wants to save the entire world. The entire world won't come to Him. It's their choice. But He loves everybody, and He died for everyone. And He desires to see good come into their life, into everybody. And Jesus says to us, I want you to love one another, even as I have loved you. You know how Jesus loved me? You don't, but I do. Because I know all the nasty, dirty little hidden things that were in my life that He overlooked, or He did away with those things. He loved me anyway. And you know that story about you. You know what you have done, and He loves you anyway. Even with those things in our life. And we're to love one another with that kind of love. So I would say this to you today: before you go to war, don't let assumption write a story that love has not investigated. Joshua 22 begins with this great blessing, and it nearly ends in bloodshed. And some of the people in this chapter believe, well, the issue here is rebellion. But as I read through it, I see the issue isn't rebellion. The issue is making assumptions that are fueled by suspicion. And this is what having suspicion will do in your life. It will cause you to go to war on half of a story. So I want you to take note of this. Point 1, a blessing can be misread by a suspicious heart. A blessing can be misread by a suspicious heart. Open up, if you want to Joshua chapter 22. I'm going to read verse 5 through 9. Only be very careful to observe the commandment and the law that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, to love the Lord your God and to walk in all His ways and to keep His commandments and to cling to Him and to serve Him with all of your heart and with all of your soul. So Joshua blessed them and sent them away, and they went to their tents. Now to one half of the tribe of Manasseh, Moses had given a possession in Bashan, and to the other half, Joshua had given a possession beside their brothers in the land west of the Jordan. And when Joshua sent them away to their homes, he blessed them, and he said to them, go back to your tents with much wealth and very much livestock, with silver, gold, bronze, and iron, and with much clothing. Divide the spoils of your enemies with your brothers. So the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh returned home, parting from the people of Israel at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan, to go to the land of Gilead, to their own land, of which they had possessed themselves by commandment through Moses. So here's the deal. Joshua blessed them, right? And it sounds great. He gives them this charge. He releases them to go back to the Reubenites, the Gadites, the half-tribe of Manasseh. He says, be careful to obey the Lord, love the Lord, walk in his ways, keep his commandments, cling to him, serve him with all of your heart, with all of your soul. Those are good, encouraging words. That's what it was. This was not an accusation. This was a blessing. This was an encouragement. But when you begin to add suspicion into that, it can twist encouragement into a judgment. Suspicious hearts can get dangerous. This is what it does. It adds to what was heard things that were never even said. Joshua said, be careful to obey. Suspicion says, he must be saying that because they are prone to disobey. Is that what Joshua said? No, but that's what suspicion thinks. Joshua said, love the Lord your God. Suspicion would say, they must not really have a heart that loves the Lord completely. Joshua says, walk in all his ways. Suspicion says, yeah, they do their own thing. Joshua says, cling to the Lord. Suspicion says, they must be the kind of people that don't have strong faith. It's reading between the lines is what it is. But oftentimes, suspicion writes, again, what truth never says. Does that make sense? Suspicion can write what truth never says because we like to read between the lines. And the problem is this can create a negative culture. And I've seen this. I've seen this in churches. I've seen this create a culture of non-response because of suspicion and reading between the lines. And this is what I mean by that. Sometimes there's an altar call given. Sometimes there's a time of response to the word. And someone is moved and they hear it and they feel like, yeah, that's me. I need to respond to what's being said. But then they think about, but what are people going to think? Because the minute that person walks down, suspicion amongst others sometimes say, well, I wonder what their deal is. Somebody could be sitting in their seat and God's tugging at their heart to respond and think, well, if I go forward, man, people are going to think I'm living in sin. People are going to think I'm messed up. So they stay in their seat. And it's not because God's not moving. It's because they don't want to respond out of this fear of judgment or assumptions. And it keeps people from responding. And you say, well, we shouldn't worry about what people think. And I agree to that. But a lot of the reason people think that, this is the sad truth, is because they have a reason to think that because of the response of people that have happened in the past. There has been negative response like that. And I wouldn't ever hope that would happen here. But I've seen it. And maybe you have too. But the truth is, we don't know the whole story anyway. Regardless of whatever the altar time or response time might be, we don't know why someone is coming forward. We can read into that things that we shouldn't read into that. We don't know if this person is coming to repent, coming to surrender their life, coming to intercede. Maybe they're grieving. Maybe they're just seeking wisdom. Maybe it's not really even due to that call, but they're not going to miss an opportunity to come and respond to the Lord. So we have to be careful reading between the lines. If before we dismiss today, I called Benny up here, I'm picking on you, Benny. And I said, Benny, be careful to obey the Lord. You stay close to him, love him, walk in his ways, cling to him. You better serve him with all your heart. How many people would wonder, man, what's going on with Benny? What does Pastor know? Right? We're quick to do that sometimes. We make assumptions. It's not always right. The bad part with assumptions, too, is for some reason, even though we do all make assumptions, we don't always have to assume the worst first. But isn't that what we often do? Many issues could be avoided if we just assumed good intentions. Someone doesn't wave at you at Walmart. We can assume first they didn't see me. But oftentimes we assume first, well, I can't believe them. They ignored me. Suspicion can write a much shorter story when it says they didn't see you. Because, that kind of is the end of it. But when suspicion begins to read between the lines, it says, well, they're ignoring me. And then all of a sudden the story can continue for as long as you want to write it about why. If we would assume they had good intentions, we would save ourselves a lot of trouble. Suspicion will assume the worst from what you see. So I want you to know this, point number 2. What you see is not always what it means. Look at verse 10 through 12. And when they came to the region of the Jordan, that is in the land of Canaan, the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh built there an altar by the Jordan, an altar of imposing size. And the people of Israel heard it, said, behold, the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh have built an altar at the frontier of the land of Canaan, in the region about the Jordan, on the side that belongs to the people of Israel. And when the people of Israel heard it, the whole assembly of the people of Israel gathered at Shiloh to make war against them. The 2.5 tribes built this very large altar. It wasn't something that they were trying to hide. It wasn't something that they were ashamed of or trying to get away with. It was something that was meant to be seen. The rest of Israel sees it or hears about it, and they observe this, and they immediately assume, this is rebellion, this is bad. These people are doing wrong. So what do? They act on their assumption, and they gather up, we're going to go to war against them, and they start to make an enemy out of their own brothers. They gather for war before they know the whole story. I know none of you would ever do that, neither would I. Right? You definitely want to hear the whole story before you begin to form an opinion. Right? We don't do that, do we? Sometimes we get upset and we don't even know the whole truth. They observed what was happening, and they allowed suspicion to read between the lines. Here's a statement that could probably save you in some relationships. Observation is not revelation. We have to understand that. Observation is not revelation. I'm going to read you a little story. A man had a neighbor who was known for watching everything on the street, a woman. One night, she noticed his truck parked in front of another woman's house that didn't have the best reputation. And by the next morning, half the neighborhood had heard what she thought was going on. And the man heard about the rumor. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just smiled. Then that night, after everyone went to bed, he quietly drove his truck over and parked in front of the nosy neighbor's house. By morning, she understood the danger of assuming too much from a parked car. Right? Observation is not revelation. Not always. Somebody misses church for a few Sundays, they must be a backslider. I've seen it. People take a break from a ministry position, and we're thinking, what's wrong? They're not on fire for the Lord, or they must be offended at something. Someone starts a new ministry, some might think, well, they're just being divisive. They just can't get along with how we do it, and they're going to go do their own thing. Someone worships differently than what we do, and we'll just assume they're just trying to draw attention to themselves. This is what happened with Israel. They saw with suspicious eyes, and they assumed it was evil. And like I said, they made their brothers into enemies. And we aren't immune to this behavior either. When suspicion becomes the lens that we're looking through, even innocent things can look guilty. It's like taking a pair of glasses that are all smudged up, and you put them on, and you look at the room, and the room looks dirty. The room hasn't changed, but the way you view it has. So we have to be careful. Be careful to not view everything through suspicion. Now, Israel, they were suspicious. But at least, even in their suspicion, at least they sort of almost did something right, something that was good, that we should learn from, is they sent some representatives to go talk to this other 2.5 tribes before they launched the attack. So, third point is this: before you swing the sword, ask a question. Look at verse 13 through 16. Then the people of Israel sent the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh in the land of Gilead, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the priest, and with him 10 chiefs, one from each of the tribal families of Israel, every one of them the head of a family among the clans of Israel. And they came to the people of Reuben, the people of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh in the land of Gilead, and they said to them, "Thus says the whole congregation of the Lord, what is this breach of faith that you have committed against the God of Israel in turning away this day from following the Lord and building yourselves an altar this day in rebellion against the Lord?" So they did send somebody to ask a question. That's good. But how you ask the question is also very important. Because it could go down like this: did you mean to say what I heard you say? Or, did you mean to sound so stupid when I heard you say what you said? See how there's a bit of a difference? It does matter how you ask. And what I see in Israel, what I see in their question, they're coming, they already assume something, and when they come to communicate, yes, they come to ask, but they came to ask already judging what was going on. They already assumed they knew, so what did they say? They said, "What is this breach of faith that you've committed against God and turning away this day in your rebellion?" Not, "Hey, what's going on here? Is there a breach of faith?" Nope. They've already said, this is a breach of faith. You've committed. You're in rebellion. They did have a conversation, but they came with the verdict already. They assumed the altar was built for improper motives, and their question wasn't seeking motives. Their question was looking for proof of why they already felt the way they did. There's a difference between seeking the truth and looking for guilt. And that's a hard line to distinguish, because sometimes, Christians, sometimes we can confuse suspicion with discernment. It's a fine line. Suspicion's going to lean on your flesh. Discernment is going to lean on your spirit. And we are at constant war between our flesh and our spirit, and which one is going to win. And sometimes when we lean into suspicion, we're leaning into the flesh. We're not leaning into the spirit. And when you think what you have as discernment could be complete suspicion and not what the Lord is speaking. Is there a time to confront sin? Yes, there is. Is there a time to ask hard questions? Absolutely. Are we just to turn a blind eye to utter rebellion? No, we're not. But there's a way of biblical confrontation, it should be rooted in truth, humility, and love, and genuine restoration. There is a time to confront, but if your motive is to prove them wrong, is to tear them down, does that sound like restoration? It doesn't. And so relationships can remain strained, especially when the approach is wrapped in accusations. And it's easy. It's easy to do. It's really easy to do when we've seen things before. So we have to use some caution. Point number 4 is this: past pain can become present suspicion. Look at verse 17. Have we not had enough of the sin at Peor, which even yet we have not cleansed ourselves, for which there came a plague upon the congregation of the Lord, that you too must turn away this day from following the Lord, and you too rebel against the Lord today? Then tomorrow he will be angry with the whole congregation of Israel. But now, if the land of your possession is unclean, pass over into the Lord's land, where the Lord's tabernacle stands, and take for yourselves a possession among us. Only do not rebel against the Lord and make us rebels by building for yourself an altar other than the altar of the Lord our God. Did not Achan the son of Zerah break faith in the matter of devoted things, and wrath fell upon all the congregation of Israel? And he did not perish alone for his iniquity. So what they do, they come, they're making this judgment already, and they bring up this past failure at Peor. And you can read about that if you want to go back in Numbers 25. But the Israelites yoked themselves with the god of Peor. And this happened through prostitutes that were drawing the men into worship, and they were worshiping God, or worshiping the god, Baal of Peor. And this was, God had to put a stop to this, and it caused this plague, and 24,000 people died because of what they were doing at Peor. And Phinehas, which we just read about, who's one of the representatives that went, Phinehas saw this, and people were weeping over all this that was going on, and then they're trying to figure out, how do we get right with God in this situation? We've done wrong. And they find out it's because of this prostitution that's going on. And then here walks an Israelite man with one of the daughters of Moab, one of the prostitutes, and he goes into his tent, not ashamed. He doesn't have a problem with it at all. Phinehas sees this, and he's burning with zeal from the Lord. He grabs a spear, goes into the tent, and drives it through both of them and kills them. And that stopped the judgment of the Lord on that day. Now, the same Phinehas is looking at what's going on with this altar and thinking back, I would assume, thinking back of times that people have turned their back on the Lord like then, and what it meant back then. And he can easily view this current situation through a lens of past pain. Yesterday's wounds can easily, very easily, become today's suspicions. They saw Achan, who broke faith when it came to devoted things of God, and how this caused issues in Israel, and the pain of that. Now they're looking at we have to go through this again. A repeated pain, another thing that we have to deal with. Past pain can become present suspicion. Now you, in your life, in your Christian life, in your church experience, you may have been hurt by a pastor or a leader at some point in your life. I'm not that pastor. Right? I'm not. I hope not. I hope I'm not the one that hurt you. If I am, talk to me and I'll make it right. But you may have been hurt by a previous pastor, but that's not me. But there still can be suspicion as you're watching me. But guess what? See, I'm not immune to this either because I've been hurt by congregants, people in the congregation in the past, people that you never thought would have said certain things or done certain things, and those people aren't you. But I have to watch myself also to not look through the lens of suspicion, because I have just as much tendency as you do when it comes to these things. And here's the thing, all of us can apply pain of old wounds to new situations. We're not immune. But I think the concern of what was going on with these 2.5 tribes was less about what the 2.5 tribes were doing and a whole lot more about not wanting to get hurt again. And then I see that with this attitude. You ever heard that hurt people hurt people? If you haven't heard it, you have now. So let me ask again. Have you ever heard hurt people hurt people? Yeah, I know you have. But then as I'm reading through this is what I see. I see like this attitude, and I could be wrong, but I see this attitude, this little holier than thou attitude that comes out. Because they say, well, if your possession is unclean, then you can come on over to the Lord's land. Right? Where the Lord's tabernacle is, unlike what you have. You can take possession among us, the real ones, not like the red-headed stepchildren that you are. Really, it can come across like this. Well, God's with us more than he is with you. And that is an attitude that divides churches even today. Within a church, within churches in a community. You may have the right concern, but it can become wrong when it's carried by a suspicious spirit. So what about this? What about when you are the one that is being wrongfully accused? Point number 5 is when accused, start with God. And I'll get to what I mean by that here in just a second. Look at verse 21. I'll read through 29. Then the people of Reuben, the people of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh said in answer to the heads of the family of Israel, the mighty one, God the Lord, the mighty one, God the Lord, he knows, and let Israel itself know. If it was in rebellion or in breach of faith against the Lord, do not spare us today for building an altar to turn away from following the Lord. Or if we did so to offer burnt offerings or grain offerings or peace offerings on it, may the Lord himself take vengeance. No. But we did it from fear that in time to come, that your children might say to our children, what have you to do with the Lord, the God of Israel? For the Lord has made the Jordan a boundary between us and you and the people of Reuben and the people of Gad. You have no portion in the Lord, so your children might make our children cease to worship the Lord. Therefore we said, let us build an altar not for burnt offering, not for sacrifice, but to be a witness between us and you, between our generations after us, that we do perform the service of the Lord in his presence with our burnt offerings and sacrifices and peace offerings, so your children will not say to our children in time to come, you have no portion in the Lord. And we thought, if this should be said to us or to our descendants in time to come, we should say, behold, the copy of the Lord, or the altar of the Lord, which our fathers made, not for burnt offerings, nor for sacrifice, but to be a witness between us and you. Far be it from us that we should rebel against the Lord and turn away this day from following the Lord by building an altar for burnt offering, grain offering, or sacrifice, other than the altar of the Lord our God that stands before his tabernacle. And here's what's interesting. If you get accused, go to God first. The 2.5 tribes, they got accused of something, and they don't start with insult or ego. They don't say, well, how dare you come to me like that? Nor do they deny building the altar. Instead, they respond by appealing to God first. If any situation, go to God first. If you are wrongfully accused, go to the Lord first. Ask and seek. Don't just respond back quickly. Go to the Lord. Take it to Him first. He understands. He knows your motives. It's the perfect place to start. See, when someone mistreats you or someone says something that isn't true, again, your flesh wants to defend itself. Your flesh wants to attack. Your flesh wants to lash out. Your flesh wants to prove your point or even prove your innocence. But there's a better way. Start with God first. God first. Say, Lord, if there's any of this that is accurate or true, you search my heart first. Because I want to be right before you, before I ever try to find myself right in front of eyes of men. See, these guys, they couldn't deny building the altar. And they didn't. But they could deny the motive that had been assigned to why they built the altar. The motive wasn't rebellion. The motive was remembrance. They built this altar as a witness for future generations, that they would know that they belonged to. The motive wasn't separation of, well, we're just going to go do our own thing. We don't have to come over there to you. That was separation, but the motive was a way to prevent exclusion. But the irony is, they built this altar because they feared exclusion, and the altar had barely been finished, and already they're facing exclusion. And that's what the enemy wants. See, they had built this altar as an expansion of the kingdom of God. Not a different place to offer sacrifice, but a place of remembrance so they know and can point to the Lord, a way to expand the kingdom. And what the enemy wants to do is anytime there's an opportunity to expand the kingdom, he's looking a way to isolate people, to exclude people, and to halt any expansion. And if Israel would have acted upon immediately their assumption, they would have destroyed brothers who were actually trying to preserve unity. So remember that too. When you have an offense, when there's something going on, don't just jump onto it with an assumption. Good news is this. Conversations that are searching the truth can resolve a lot of issues that we face. Point number 6 is this. Communication can repair what an assumption almost destroyed. Verse 30 and 31. When Phinehas the priest and the chiefs of the congregation and the heads of the families of Israel who were with him heard the words that the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the people of Manasseh spoke, it was good in their eyes. And Phinehas the son of Eleazar the priest said to the people of Reuben and to the people of Gad and to the people of Manasseh, today we know that the Lord is in our midst, because you have not committed this breach of faith against the Lord. Now you have delivered the people of Israel from the hand of the Lord. Once the representatives hear the whole story, they said, today we know. Now we know. They didn't know before the conversation. They had only assumed before the congregation or the conversation. And what they had assumed was wrong. And when they came and they had communication, things got sorted out. These were godly people too. It's not like just bad, evil people. These are godly people that were judging from assumptions. Assumptions aren't always right. Conversations for truth should be something that we constantly hold on to and seek to do. We shouldn't be too quick to say, God's not in that, before having a conversation. Or that's not of God, before seeking to understand what's going on. Good communication can bring clarity, can bring humility, can bring peace. Either from you in your life or them, whoever you need to communicate with. I've heard it said like this, that assumptions build walls and communication builds bridges. And that's what we want. Israel, once they understood the motive, they didn't keep pressing the accusation. They received the truth, and then they chose peace. And that's what we're called. We're called to build one another up. We're not called to tear one another down. Am I right? Point 7, last point. Do not destroy what God wants to redeem. Look at the last couple verses here. Then Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the priest, and the chiefs returned from the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the land of Gilead and the land of Canaan to the people of Israel, and brought back word to them, and their report was good in the eyes of the people of Israel. And the people of Israel blessed God and spoke no more of making war against them to destroy the land where the people of Reuben and the people of Gad were settled. The people of Reuben and the people of Gad called the altar Witness, for they said, it is a witness between us that the Lord is God. People, they hear when this group comes back to tell them, and they hear it, they bless God, and they don't make it an issue anymore. They drop the issue. There's no more talk of making war. And it says, it's interesting, it shows their motive. They were going to go destroy, not just make war, destroy the land. That's what their assumption nearly did, to make enemies out of their brothers. God didn't want to destroy them. So if they would have acted on their assumption, they would have went against the will of the Lord. God doesn't want to destroy your neighbor. You know, even the wicked person that you know in your neighborhood, God has no pleasure in the destruction of the wicked. God wants to see them all redeemed. He wants to see them restored. Jesus came to restore. He didn't come to kill. He came to give life. It's the thief who comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. So before we set off in our lives to destroy, we need to seek to restore. So ask yourself this. Have I assumed the worst about someone? Have I attached motives without knowing the heart? Have I repeated a story before knowing the whole story? Have I let past hurt create present suspicion? If your answer was yes, mine was, then we have a tendency to do the wrong thing. But the Lord wants us to do the right thing. He wants to coach us and to lead us. So before you accuse, just examine your heart. Go to the Lord. Before you assume, start asking some questions. And how you ask matters. Before you go to war with someone, seek the whole story. And again, before you seek to destroy, seek to restore. And I'm going to end with this final statement. Don't let assumptions write a story that love has not investigated. Does that sound fair?